Yes.
So, Nivedita, in the evening, we realized that we would not take off till about 6 or 7 in the evening. Nonetheless, we were all ready, and Ministry of Defense was informed that instead of it being a day operation, it's going to be a night operation. Right. Meanwhile, while I was sitting in the office, this must have been at about 6 in the evening, I got a call from the American ambassador. Now, the American ambassador, a very charming gentleman by the name of Bill Clark. I knew Bill Clark because we had met often various parties. A very happy man and full of goodwill. And I think he was very fond of India. Uh, so Bill Clark rang me up. He said, General, I want to come and meet you. I said, fine, I'm sitting here doing nothing. You can come and meet me right now. So he came to meet me. And he said, General, this problem in the Maldives going on. I said, yes, we've heard. He said, so what are you doing about it? I said, what shall I do about it? We're a poor third world country. We don't know what to do. You tell me, you're a big shot American, the big power hungry nation of the world. What are you doing about it? He said, well, we moved to cruisers, naval warships from the Philippines to go to Maldives. And we moved 2 cruisers from the Gulf, that is the Persian Gulf, to go to the Maldives. So I said, what are these ships supposed to do? They'll go there and see if they can help. I said, how many days do you think your ships, your warships will reach that or to reach that? He said, about 3 days. I said, by that time, the president of this island would have been scuppered and it would be a terrorist island. What are you going to do? Are you going to sort of bombard them from the sea or are you going to start landing troops or something? Because then you got a fight on your hands. He said, I don't know. I suppose those ships will decide what to do. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not very impressed with you guys because we were all hoping that you Americans, the big shots of the world, would do something to help a democratic nation which has been attacked by terrorists. You've got a huge setup in Yogyakarta, which is in the southern part of the Indian Ocean. You've got so much stuff with you. You've got an aircraft, you've got everybody. What are you using ship for? Why don't you go by air and, parachutes and things? He said, no, this is what was decided by our government, and so that's it. So he said, but are you Indians doing anything? I said, no, what are we supposed to do? So I don't know. He says, but I'm told, I ascertained that the Indians are working on this. I said, they may be working on it, but I don't know what to do. So we had a good conversation, gave him a nice hot cup of coffee, and he went. Meanwhile, uh, we found that the liaison between the brigade commander, the battalion commander in Agra, and his counsel from the foreign ministry who was come from Maldives was done. These 4 guns were loaded, and these aircraft flew off at about 6 or 7 o'clock. They reached Trivandrum, where they halted for 2 hours to have a rest. The aircraft were maintained and refueled, and everybody had a hot meal. It was very well organized, and we were very happy to learn that everybody was full of go. Then they set off to cross the ocean. Now, I must tell you that the Maldives, if you look at it from the air, is like a little postage stamp floating in the air, and you have to see it from 2,000 feet up. This is the size of the airfield. At night, when these aircraft go, the lead aircraft the stream follows him. The lead aircraft was an Illusion 76 with about 100 people on board, including the brigade commander and his tactical headquarters, including the counsel from the foreign ministry who was accompanying. And the pilot, if you please, happened to be a Rimcollian. Now, why I mention this is that, Rimcollians are those people, they may not have many brains, but if something's got to be done, they just go ahead and do it. And there's a lot of coordination between Napoleons who are Army, Navy, or Air Force, which doesn't happen elsewhere so much because we are brothers, all of us. And he happened to be the son of General Bevoor. Now, General Bevoor had been an army chief in his time, Maharashtrian gentleman, and this guy was his son. And he had joined the Air Force, and he was the group captain, and he was on the lead aircraft. Now, if you hear his story, it's a very interesting one as to how do you fly the aircraft in the middle of the darkness. There was no moon, by the way, because the clouds were there. So it is a question of dead reckoning. You decide on which bearing you have to fly. And you go along hoping that this postage stamp won't be missed in the dark waters of the Indian Ocean in the middle of the night. And it's very small, as we see. So you know that after about so many hours of flying, let us say about an hour and a half of flying, that you will be somewhere near the island. So he sent us a message from the aircraft because we had given orders that the airfield lights of the Maldives airport, of the airfield island, will not be switched on. Why? Because if you switch on the lights, then the terrorists will see that the lights have been switched on and they might do some nasty business there and try and get away. So we had given orders that it will have to be a darkness. We were hoping to land during daytime, but now it is night. So this guy, when he felt he was near the island, he sent us a message on the radio to say that I would like the lights to be flashed on to at least see I'm somewhere near the island or not and align my aircraft. He was flying only about 300 or 400 feet above the ocean, you see. And he didn't want to do a circuit. You know, normally when an aircraft lands, he locates the airfield. He does a circuit to see exactly which way the wind is blowing and all that sort of thing, you know, and how to land because there's a windsock on the airfield. And he wants to land in a certain way, gets his bearing, but this chap decided that he should land straight. This is a difficult landing. Requires very good aircraft control and a very good judgment by the pilot to firstly align the aircraft and land. And he asked for this light to be switched on and off. So this light was switched on and off, he aligned. He said, fine, now in the next few minutes, I'm going to be about to touch down, then the lights must come on. In a few minutes, he touched down, we all were hoping that he doesn't miss this little postage stamp. And as luck would have it, he landed beautifully. Now, mark you, I had suggested to the Air Force and the Para Brigade that, look, in case you can't land because the island is occupied and they start firing machine guns at our aircraft, we don't want one of our aircraft to be hit because if it gets down, then 100 people go down into the, you know. So I said, then you must do para jumping. But I was told by the parachute brigade, it's a very small island and para jumping cannot be done in the middle of the night because if you miss the island with the heavy load that you're carrying, you know, when you go in the parachute, you've got a bag under you containing your weapons and your ammunition and all that sort of thing. If you land in the sea, you'll just sink. And there'll be a large number of casualties. So they said we must try and land even if it's occupied. So all right, whatever it was not occupied, his luck will have it. And he landed. And we came to know later that the airfield was too short for the landing of a huge aircraft of edition 76 with 4 engines. And he really had to put all his brakes and afterburners and, you know, engine brakes and all that on. He almost toppled into the ocean on the other side, but he managed to hold it intact. Straight away, all the parachutists jump out and occupy the island with the machine guns and so on. So that we occupied the island after landing. Then the rest of the aircraft landed one after the other with the aircraft lights up, with the airport runway lights on. Then they found that because 2 nautical miles, not much of a distance, as I said, 3 or 4 kilometers on the ocean, you can see straight. They saw that on the Malay harbor, there was a merchant ship which started running away from when they saw these aircraft. Because, you know, these aircraft are such huge aircraft making such a big noise, and there must have been a large number of these aircraft landing one after the other. That put the fear of God and the devil into the hearts of the terrorists. And they quickly collected whatever they could from the island. This is the story we came to know later. And they got most of the men, 200 men, back on the merchant ship. And they took 5 hostages with them. and they started moving out of the harbor. So the parachute brigade had no weapons at that time to fire against the ship, except those bazooka type weapons, with anti-tank weapon. Not got much of a range. They fired a few bazooka shots at this merchant vessel, with no effect at all, and this fellow steamed out of the harbor. Anyway, since all the boats were in the airport island, as per our instructions earlier in the morning, people got into the boats and their soldiers came and occupied the island of Male, just the capital, without resistance. They straight away spread all over the place, reoccupied the police headquarters, and then the council fellow got and started doing his work to collect all the politicians together, and the information was given to President Gayoom that please come back to your palace. Indians have secured it. He came back and, Maldives government was put together again. But they said that 5 of their ministers have been carried away as hostages in that ship. So, Mr. Guru, Vice Admiral Guru Hiranandani came and met me with a great smile on his face to say maybe the Navy has a time to do something about this operation. I said, yes, it has. So, what are you going to do? Night. So he said, well, we've got one warship called the Betwa, if I recollect, anti-aircraft frigate, which had gone on a ceremonial visit to Australia. Now, when you go on a ceremonial visit, all guns and all ammunition and all crews are ready for battle. You go on a ceremonial visit, but the ship is completely ready for battle. So they were on their way back, and they were about, I think, 3/4 of the way across the Bay of Bengal. And to come to Cochin, where the harbor is, they have to go through southern Sri Lanka and then come up on the western coast to go to Cochin, which is their base. And they were approaching the southern coast of Sri Lanka. So that captain was told on wireless by the Navy headquarters, put on full engine blasts and come up the coast between Colombo and Sri Lankan coastline and the Maldives coastline, because this merchant vessel is got away and it has to be headed off. So he crossed the thing and with full engine blast, it is coming. Now, when a warship, this is a Russian designed warship, goes on full steam, he managed to do about 32 kilometers, 32 knots per hour. See? Whereas the merchant vessel doesn't do more than 5 or 6 knots per hour. See? So while the merchant ship was trying to cross that part of the Indian Ocean from Maldives to the northern coast of Sri Lanka, this ship was coming very fast to head him off. Then they sent another ship from Cochin. There was another frigate. They sent southwards to assist in this game of her getting off. So that ship was coming at full speed from north to south to cut off this guy. As the early morning dawn started breaking, then Guru Hiranandani ordered the naval aircraft to come up into the sky to locate where that target ship is. Now, this is the Dornier aircraft. It's a small aircraft, and it flies over the ocean. And when you're flying in the ocean, there are miles and miles of open sea, and that's all you see. But nonetheless, they had a good idea of the route that that ship would follow, that merchant vessel, from Maldives to the northern coast of Sri Lanka. So they're flying around there, and they located the ship. So they gave its grid bearings and its position and its speed to these 2 warships that were heading off. So they adjusted the line of advance and caught this fellow before it covered hardly 3/4 of the distance, because he was a slow-moving fellow, and they caught him. And now the story here is something like this. By the way, Guru Hiranandani he has written the history of the Navy, and he's explained all this there. So apparently the captain of this warship, Awaz, when he came to the vicinity of this merchant vessel, he sent him a message on the megaphone and all that. Please heave to, that means you stop your engines. Otherwise, we will bash you up. So that terrorist captain, he was in the, in the merchant vessel, the high point is the cabin where the control systems are and where the captain resides. He's got windows all around, and plus it's got control of the engine and control of other things gives orders from there. So he said, I am not going to stop. And if you interfere with me, I've got 5 ministers on board. I'll scuttle the ship. That means I'll make it sink. And that's it. And all these chaps will die. So the naval captain was used some initiative. He didn't go back for any further instructions from the Navy headquarters because you've got you go by instructions also. People make all sorts of opinions which on the spot mean very little. So he straight away told the chap, if you want to scuttle your ship, don't worry, I'll help you to scuttle the ship. And he fired around in front of the ship and behind the ship so that they could see that we are ready to fire. But that chap didn't stop, he carried on. So he fired the next round straight at the control cabin of the, once the thing landed there, all these terrorists, as I told you earlier, a terrorist is like a bully. He's got the gun, he wants your stuff, and he'll point the gun at you and take what he likes. But if you start acting against him, he runs. Like all bullies do. You need a box on the face of a bully, and that's it. So they all came running, putting their hands up because they didn't want to die. So then the Navy captain said, you halt your ship. It's all right, don't fire anymore. We gave up. So a boarding party was sent by boat, took over the controls of that ship, got it. It was already leaning to one side because, some of the naval shots had made it lean on one side. It was taking water. Towed it back to Mali and handed over those almost 200 terrorists and 5 ministers to the government of Mali. That was the action by the Navy. So in the end result, all the 3 services combined to carry out this action, which I think was 100% success, with not a single casualty. Because there were no casualties, people don't think much of this operation. But what I might tell you is, this operation is one of the few operations in India's independent India's history of warfare, where the complete task was completed by all 3 services in a combined manner, without a single casualty. Number 2, we saved the government of Mali and of the Maldives, and Abdul Gayoom was very happy, getting his country back under his command. And he requested the Prime Minister that, look, my police is not very good. I have a lot of these terrorists hanging around here, like what happened now. So I would like you to leave this battalion here for some time to train our police how to function, to assist us in making a security system for this island in case bad guys come and act funny with us. So we lost the para battalion for a whole year, where they had to train these people, plus not only in Mali, but the other hundreds of islands over there, how to patrol these, what sort of patrolling vessels to get, what sort of organization you should have, and what is the training that will be given to your police people, and what is the type of communication they are required to have. So all this was done by India over the next 1 year. And relations between Mali and us became very good since then, except recently you heard there were some other guys trying to take over the government and whatever it was. That's politics. But as far as this action is concerned, the American ambassador came to me the next morning in the office. He said, General, you told me you knew nothing about it. He came to me at about 9 in the morning. I said, well, how do you know what we've done? He said, we've got those reconnaissance aircraft of the Americans flying over Mali all the time to see what's happening there. And we suddenly noticed in the morning a whole lot of Indian aircraft of the airfield and huge number of troops hanging around. So he's obviously, you've done the job. I said, well, when America can't go do the job, call on us Indians, we do it. Because it's a question of coordination between the civil authority and the military authority, on the one hand, and the very close coordination of the government, which allows something like this to happen. So then he asked me, he says, you've got what is known as a quick reaction force ready to do any operations in India. I said, no, we don't. He said, then how did you do this? I said, well, these are, God is very great. He helps us. we are not ready for anything. But when the occasion arises, we do get ready suddenly. And we're a lucky nation because everything is a bit of luck. The fact that the aircraft landed on the airfield is a lot of luck. The second fact is that we were prepared with our military and our boats, etc., and we found an easy entry into the Malay Island. That was also luck. And then the Navy was ready, and that old merchant vessel that the terrorists were trying to get away on, and which was not very fast, that's also a piece of luck. And we managed to collect everything. So it was a completely successful operation in all respects. Not much talked about because there were no cases. There were one or two minor awards given. And awards are normally given when people die. Yeah, few awards were given, and that's all. So that was the Maldives operation. President Gayoom came and visited India after that. And we all Army chief, Navy chief, and Air Force chief were asked to meet him personally because he wanted to thank us. He thanked the government. And he presented me a Rado watch. He said, General, this is for you, which I gave to my wife. I don't know where it is now. She must have hidden it somewhere. So that's it. The American News magazine published on the cover of the Time magazine the new military power of the world, India, with showing aircraft flying in the sky and submarines and ships moving around and army chaps knocking around, to saying that India has shown the world that it is capable of doing military operations outside their land. Now we were a bit surprised with all that because we didn't realize that this would have an effect on the military thinking of all nations on world, that you've got in India the capability of carrying out operations outside the Indian landmass. You see, and that's also a matter of ours. Shortly after this operation, I told you, happened in early November of 1988, and I was scheduled for a ceremonial visit to go to Australia. So I think in early December, I was off to Australia. I had taken a staff officer with me and my ADC, a person called Rai, R-A-I. His nickname is Tinu, T-E-N-U. He's Bhajan Singh Rai or something in name. Very fine officer from my regiment. So he also went with me, and we had the pleasure of visiting Australia for a week, where my first appointment was with the Chief of Defence Staff, who is an engineer officer who had become Chief of Defence Staff of the Australian Armed Forces. And we went to his office, and after some pleasantry, he said, General, I didn't know that you Indians have a quick reaction military force which can function within hours. I said, well, I didn't know that either. He said, how did you manage it? I said, in luck of the draw. I mean, we asked people to do things which had never been asked to do before. And as the luck would have it all worked out. I said, in battle, you can plan whatever you like, but at the end of the day, what is your kismet? If it's there, you're successful. And if it's not there, you're not. But in our case, it is successful. Maybe the country is a lucky country. And so are we. So then he said, we've got a whole quick reaction force of a full division worth. Now, this is only a parachute brigade with hardly a couple of battalions, and we only took one battalion. He's got a whole division with 3 brigades located in the area of Brisbane, eastern coast of Australia. Of course, I was at Canberra talking to this guy. And I said, then if you got a quick reaction force of a whole division, what does it do for a living? Have you ever used it? He said, no. I said, then where do you want to use it? He said, if some problem arises, we'll use it. I said, there's an island called Fiji. I don't know if you know that. In the western Pacific Ocean. In that island, just shortly before I arrived at Australia, there was a little incident. They had an election. And in that island, there were a large number of Indians also. Indians go everywhere, like the Chinese. So there was a businessman who was in that election elected as the prime minister of that island. Now the person who was in charge of the Fiji armed forces, which is hardly a few battalions worth, I suppose. He was the Fijian, local Fijian brigadier. And when the Indian gentleman, business gentleman, was elected as the prime minister, he said, I do not accept this because Fiji must have a Fiji official to be the prime minister, not some idiotic Indian. So he captured the poor prime minister and shoved him in jail. So the Australian chief of defense staff said, yes, I know that. I said, then what did you do? You've got a full division sitting here. Why didn't you act for democracy like the Western world insists that we will act for democracy? Democracy has to be saved. Here is a democratically elected prime minister, he may be Indian, and a military man takes over and becomes a dictator there. And you sit here with your whole division doing nothing but twiddling your thumbs. Why haven't you acted? He said, General, I'm only a military man. The government has to agree. I said, but surely you can tell the government to do something about it. Don't you have a voice? Why don't you tell the prime minister? He said, yes, but they don't listen to me. I said, then I don't know how you became the chief of defense staff. You see, I'm just telling you that there has to be a coordination between military chiefs and the politicians and everything. Just speak to each other one to one. There's no question of keeping your mouth shut when something is being done wrong. And if you are upholding democracy, and by the way, all the Western Pacific islands in the Pacific, the Australian government, supervises the system with food and the system with various administrative and other support by ship in case they want anything. So they have a right to intervene if illegal things are done. If you want the world to function with peace, then people who are elected must be permitted to take over the government. But if you use military tactics to prevent that, then you are not doing the right thing. And if you've got a large force, then why don't you intervene? Okay. So we started with that. And he got a telephone call just to explain to you what happened. And he looked very worried about this. I said, what happened? He said, a few years ago, our defense minister became a woman. And she found that the Australian Army is deficient of troops and officers because enough men are not coming forward to join the forces. So she asked the military, why aren't you recruiting women for the troops as well as for the officers? The Australian government said, no, we don't want the women in the army and all that sort of thing. But she became the defense minister and she said, look here, you are 25% short of your authorized strength. Therefore, since you can't produce the manpower for it, I say you will bring the women in. So the Australian government, to make sure that the women don't want to join the tough military, they said first the women be put into the ranks. Now this is different from the Indian government. We make women into officers. I also say, why aren't the women being brought into the ranks? You should have women battalions like the CRPA does, BSF does, not the army. So I said, if you want to have women in the military, they must be in the soldiers' rank. They must be also in the officer rank. You can't have only officers. Anyway, so they brought them into the thing. He said he explained that the Australians are very badly behaved troops. They are cursing every second. They are filthy. They don't have a bath properly. They go around with stinking bodies in their barracks. You see. So they put the women here, and they said the women who apparently are cleaner and more concerned about their, looking after their body, for instance. So they said that the Australian barracks are 2 floors, lower floor and upper floor. So they first moved the ladies into the upper floor and allowed them to stay there, and the men were at the lower floor. You see. So each floor has its own set of toilets and things. But then more women started getting recruited. So they filled up the upper floor. Then they had to mix with the soldiers at the lower floor. And he said that we all wanted to see whether they should function or not, and whether the ladies would run away back home because they'd be raped and they'd be all sorts of things. But something funny happened. When the women when the women joined the when women joined the ranks, these men started becoming cleaner and more better behaved, and they stopped cussing because the ladies don't like that. You tend to impress the ladies. So I said, what about the toilets? He said, well, when they think we first decided that out of the set of toilets, let's say toilet seats, there are 10 of them in a line. All right, 2 belong to the ladies, 8 belong to the men. But as the ladies became more and more, then they had to mix it up. So they mixed it up. And they were mixed up in the barracks. That functioned very well. And as a sequel to this, I must tell you, when I arrived at Sydney, and I want to go and meet the corps commander, Lieutenant General commanding the garrison in Sydney, it's there's a sort of a canal or a river or something there which you have to cross over a bridge. And then it's a bit of an island inside where the military established and the fort is there. So when I crossed the bridge, there's the guard there, the 12-person Australian guard. And as they saw my flag car come in, I had an Australian Major General as my hero. And the guard turned out, and all 12 of them, and the guard commander gave a word of command with the sword and gave me a salute. Very smart. So I told the chef, I said, that's a very smart guard, and I think the word of command of that guard commander was very good. He said, sir, that guard commander is a sergeant who's a woman. So there you go. They're doing very well over there. So when I was sitting with the chief of defense staff, he got this telephone call and he felt very worried. I said, now what's happened? He says, after 2 years of women doing in the rank, our defense minister said they must join the officer corps. So we put some women into the Australian Officers Training Academy, and I just received the passing out results. The person who's passed out first on the passing out order and got the gold medal, the person who passed out second with the silver medal, and the person who got the Sword of Honor as the best all-round cadet, all 3 women. This is now my problem is, we don't want the women to join infantry and armored corps, and because these are frontline teeth action units which tussle with the enemy. But if you pass out number 1, 2, and 3, you have a choice. And these women elect to join the infantry or to join the armored corps. I don't know how I'm going to stop them. So that's when you've got a problem on your hands. He says, how do you stop women in the Indian Army from joining? I said, well, the matter was raised in the Chief Staff Committee. The Navy accepted and the Air Force accepted. And they went to the Defense Ministry with that accepted. But Defense Ministry said that get a consensus with the Army also, so that we have a single order for all services. So in the Chief of Staff Committee, they asked me, I said, first, before I answer that question, would you tell me as the Air Chief, can a woman who joins the Air Force become the Chief of Air Staff? He said, oh, no, of course not. We'll keep them on the ground and we'll keep them in charge of logistics and communications and things like that. I said, what about the Navy? The Navy chief said, nothing doing. They can't be on board ship. They'll have to be on land-based. They can join legal systems and engineering systems and all that sort of thing. I said, that means you're treating them as a lesser mortal. Only when you say that they can be Chief of the Navy and Chief of the Air Force will I agree with you that yes, they can join, because then they must be equal. They said, well, why don't you do that in the Army? I said, the trouble is that in my villages, I recruit men, they only up to 8th class of education in my day. Now they have to be up to 10th class or up to 10 plus 2. But in my time, it was 8th class when we could recruit men. I said, when I go to the villages, I draw my men from villages. I'm not a high performance educated army like the Navy and Air Force, because their weapons are much more difficult to manage. In the army, we recruit from 8th class. And in the villages of this India is where I get my troops from. It's a very large army. It's over 1 million men. I don't want women to come in, because if they have to go for tests and for acceptance by selection board, they'll come in easily and the men will get left behind. And the men have got a lot of ego and they will not accept that my woman has managed to get into the army where I fail. So I said the marriage is a break, and I'm not the first man in India to try and break up all the marriages in the villages, because these frustrated men will be a law and order problem. So I said, I don't want women in the army. Of course, that's all changed now. Let's see where that goes. And we see. But I do believe that as far as India is concerned, if you bring women into the officer corps, you have to bring them into the troops also. I mean, there are various discussions on the subject. Should they be mixed battalions or should they be, I mean, like in the BSF and in the CRPF, you've got Mahila battalions, they're all women. They initially raised by men, but now their own officers are commanding women. You see? But then again, they are separate. I must share with you that in World War II, when Hitler's advance was going against Russia, this before they reached Stalingrad, there were a number of very well held positions of the Russian military, which Hitler had to, I mean, his generals had to do 2, 3 systems of attack to try and overcome this. And eventually they overcame one of the battalion positions there after much effort and a lot of casualties by the Germans. And the Germans charged out of the position. They suddenly realized that the bodies of the dead Russians were very soft. And they looked carefully after capturing the position, they saw they were all women. But in that case, what happened is that Russia, or rather Soviet Union at that time, had to have produced so much huge military forces, they were not enough to defend their land. So therefore, they recruited women who did very well. But they were full women's battalions, you see, all women. You take them out. There's another story from Russia I wanted to share with you, are known as the night witches. This term was made by the Germans because many of these women who were fond of flying, they went to Stalin and others say, what about us? You're fighting a war with Germany to the death. Give us aircraft, we'd like to fly. So in those days, these jet aircraft were just coming in and high performance propeller aircraft were coming in. The old aircraft with 2 wings, I mean, with the double wings and, slow engine, were lying in hundreds with the Russians or with the Soviets. So they said, oh, give these women. They raised a squadron of women flying these. Now there are 2. There's a pilot and a co-pilot at the back. Pilot in front, co-pilot at the back. What they did was that they used to carry a bomb in the lap of the co-pilot at the back. At night, we couldn't fly during daytime because the Germans would easily shoot down a slow-moving aircraft, which is not high performance. And so, with the anti-craft guns or by the machine gun, so they go at night. And when you go over a German encampment or a German, logistics thing, you take this bomb from the lap and just drop it over the side, and that was it. They caused a number of casualties. And when one of these aircraft crashed and they captured the person and they found they were all women, they called them the night witches because they played hell with the Germans. So this little aside on what the women can do for battle. Let's see where that goes. Now in Australia, the next visit was to Melbourne. It's a lovely visit that we had only for a day and a night, unfortunately. We stayed at an excellent hotel. And I passed a remark to my ADC, find out who owns this hotel. It's so well run. And I found it was an Oberoi Hotel, Indian. It's the best hotel, 5-star in Melbourne. All right. We there met one of the people I went and met for tea was the Indian diaspora who had retired from the Indian Army and joined either the Australian Army or retired and went to Australia. Now, these were the Anglo-Indians, the Christians, and many such. Because after independence, these Anglo-Indians who made very good troops, many of them who had reached lieutenant colonel rank or brigadier rank, some of them went up to major general rank. After they retired, they decided to quit India and go to Australia, where they were welcomed most heartily because they were military men. And the Australians probably thought that they could help in organization of their own military. So they landed up there. They had a huge party for Surupi and myself and my ADC. Gave us a high tea full of whiskey and rum and all the liquors. And then one of them, who was an Army Service Corps officer, he said, General, we've got a problem. This problem is that we left India in